several managers, black managers in the agency saying, Fogg, this is an insult. Mr. Hine has different types of discrimination cases out against him, including yours. The agency is refusing to investigate these cases, is sitting on them, not investigating them. And now what they're doing is getting ready to push this guy's name to the White House to become a United States Marshal of a predominantly black district. Somebody has to do something about this. What does Matthew Fogg do? At that time, I'm running a drug task force, fugitive unit, in the Washington metropolitan area task force, set up over in DEA, running the task force. I get a call, basically, from a top manager in the Marshal Service letting me know this is an insult. Somebody has to stop this. I go on Capitol Hill to Senator John Glenn's committee, and I request a meeting and meet with his committee. His committee was the committee that was handling the approval, the approval of these type of appointments, presidential appointments. I explained to his committee about the racial animus of this employee, Mr. Hine. One of the things that stood out with me, and I'll always remember this, because when I got there, and I think it was at least 6 people, 5 or 6 people in the room. One was black, I think the other 5 were white. They were all asking me questions. But believe it or not, I found that even though Mr. Hine told that racial coon, descriptive so-called joke at that retirement party, I looked at the pattern that he had, other than the joke, as being discriminatory. I saw the pattern. I said, let's just look at the pattern of this man. Somebody may get up and tell a racially insensitive joke. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are discriminating against people. But my concern was to look at the pattern of this individual. Why do we need the sensationalism of this joke? It didn't seem like, one of the things I observed, it didn't seem like that was the key that really got their attention. When I finally, after explaining to them all the other incidents that occurred with this man, when they said, is there anything else that this man has done that you can tell us that would say is racially, shows a racial disparity in treatment, a pattern of his? And I said, well, did you hear about this coon joke he told? And that seemed to really, all of a sudden, got their interest. And I explained to them the same joke that I just explained to you. And they said, will anybody else verify this? I said, certainly, call the United States Marshal for the District of Columbia. He was right there. Several people were very upset with him for saying, call the head of our EEO department. He was there. These people were all pretty much incensed by this joke. They did that, and what I was called and told by one of the committee members later was, this is what happened. This is also what Mr. Hine testified to in his deposition, was basically they stopped his nomination. But what happened, the reason why I was stopped was this. Mr. Hine was asked about this joke, and Mr. Hine was told, and this, like I said, once again, this is on a deposition, and Mr. Hine even testified to this, that he was told, okay, we understand that you've got these complaints in against you, this pattern here, and we want to know, why aren't the agency investigating these complaints against you? Who's responsible? Why isn't this agency investigating these complaints? Maybe they can find out. Mr. Hine said himself, he agreed that the complaints should be investigated. He went to the deputy director of the United States Marshal at that time, Marshal Service at that time. His name was John Toomey. John Toomey was white. He went to John Toomey, and John Toomey was considered a close ally or friend of Mr. Hine. John Toomey said, no problem. What I will do is go to the director of the Marshal Service. At that time, it was Michael K. Moore, who's now a sitting federal judge in Miami, Florida. He said, I'll go to Michael K. Moore, and this all came out on the record, and asked Michael K. Moore, and he went to Michael K. Moore, and Michael K. Moore says, I'm not getting in the middle of that. That's politics. I'm not getting in the middle of it. Basically, what that meant then was Ron Hine could now not be nominated, because the Glenn's committee is saying, if y'all don't investigate this stuff, then we're not going to push the name forward. Okay? So that stops Mr. Hine. But now that makes Matthew Fogg a real target now. What does Michael K. Moore do to Matthew Fogg? Now he goes to that level. Michael K. Moore, you want to?
Sure, stop right down, sure. With you the whole way.
Okay.
You've got the pattern going. You go to Glenn's committee.
Right.
You bust Hine.
Hello.
They say, Hine, you know, you're not going to investigate this stuff, and without this stuff, we can't pass you on. Michael K. Moore says, I'm not getting involved in politics. And all of a sudden now...
Yeah, now it really
now
heats
when
up.
because Hine, I'm guessing, was Moore's boy, right?
He was Toomey's boy.
Toomey's boy.
Right.
But now...
But Moore is and Moore... See, now you're at a high level here where you're dealing with directors and deputy directors of the Marshal Service. You're dealing with the highest officials in the United States Marshal Service. Now you got this little guy over here, Matthew Fogg, though, having influence on very high officials. What right does this guy got to go? But what is Matthew Fogg doing up on Capitol Hill?
Now, who sent you to Capitol Hill, or did you go on your own?
Basically, I let the United States Marshal know that that's what I was going to do.
Were you asked to go, or did you find out that John Glenn's committee is where this was going to go?
I found out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you just went.
Right, I went. I found out through some officials in the Marshal Service. Some people let me know, look, this guy is getting ready to be have his name sent to the White House, become the United States Marshal. All these discrimination complaints out against him. Everybody in the Marshal, most of the blacks feel he's a discriminatory official. Somebody needs to do something, but nobody wants to do anything.
Why did you have to go alone if everybody felt this way? And why did you go alone?
Well, I'll tell you why. That's very clear. Because many people weren't ready to take the heat that they knew would come behind exposing something like this, whistleblowing, if you want to call it. Nobody wants to take that heat.
So all of a sudden, you start this thing, quash Hine's promotion.
Right.
And now you are looking across the table at Michael K. Moore.
Hello. That's correct.
Where do we go from here?
Well, now direct involvement happens with me. What happens is about 2 months later or so, my name comes up at the top, one of the top names on a certification list of a promotions. My name is right at just about the top. I was number 3, but what happened was the 2 white gentlemen that were in front of me, number 2 dropped out. So that meant now I'm number 2 on the list. The manager of the position, the manager in charge of the position that I had applied for, selected me, number 2, and the top guy who was white, selected both of us for positions that he had the power and the position to do it. To select, that was, I mean, he had the position to do that. Selected myself and another individual for the jobs. He had 2 positions open. So we applied along with 15 other or 14 other people. But the 2 top people on the list were selected by this manager, Michael K. Moore. Now, normally the director never gets involved in this process at this level. He only signs off whenever what it is in our agency, certifications of positions of grade 13 and higher, the director signs off on them. But usually the selecting official is the manager of the particular division, organization, or group that has the positions open. In this case, the manager happened to be a black manager. He selected me and the top guy who was white, both of us, the 2 top people on the list for this position. And Michael K. Moore, when it gets to him, he pulls my name off the list and puts a white guy, number 15, on the cert list over me.
And you did what?
I filed a complaint on it. I filed a retaliation complaint. Continuation of retaliation because of this whole discriminatory process that took place in the beginning.
And all of a sudden, Matthew Fogg, who sounded like he was on something of a fast track in the agency.
Right. That's a
good job, loyal worker, brave, dedicated, honest, trustworthy, and all of a sudden, marked.
That's right. That's right. And marked by the highest levels of the Marshal Service.
You're in a tight spot.
That's right.
What
That's
happens
exactly
now?
right.
Now what happens?
Well, I went to that manager. One of the first things I did when I was, this was so ironic because I was told by the manager, you and this other guy got the job. Y'all the best qualified. Y'all going to get the job, basically. You know, you basically have got the job. I was even advised by different managers and agencies, you got the job, Fogg. About 3 weeks later, I don't hear anything. And normally, sometimes it takes a little while for these jobs to come out, but I still don't hear anything. I'm working on the DEA task force. Suddenly, one day I decided to call over and ask one of the top managers at headquarters, you know, have these jobs been announced? What's going on? I mean, have the selections been made? I was told, you didn't hear about it? And I said, no. What do you hear about what? He says, well, they picked 2 white guys for the job. Fogg, as a matter of fact, the guy they picked over you was 13 degrees below you on the cert list. At that point in time, I went over immediately, confronted the manager, the black manager who was in charge. He was very upset. He said, I've never had nothing like this to happen to me, Fogg. He says, I really feel bad about this. He said, you were a top man for this job. You were well qualified. I made the best 2 selections. He said, why the director pulled your name off that list, I do not know.
Why do you think he pulled your name off the list?
I think he pulled my name off the list because I blew the whistle. I was alleging discrimination. I blew the whistle on one of his top managers.
Would that have happened if you were white?
I don't think so. I certainly don't think so, no. No. And the whole pattern, it started discriminatory. The question would have been this. There were other black people on that list. Then why didn't he put a black person up there if it wasn't discriminatory? I certainly believe discrimination was certainly a factor, and I certainly believe that the fact that I had alleged discrimination was the factor.
And all of a sudden, in addition to being a marked man, now you're a troublemaker.
That's right. That's correct.
A whistleblower.
That's right.
Not part of the team.
That's right.
And what does that mean for your career?
It's over. It means it's done. And what I'm saying, and the reason why I'm saying that, especially in this case, and this case is typical to me of the attitudes and the behavior of the United States Marshal Service managers, because what you have here is a top flight manager making this decision and making this move. So what it happens is the corruption then runs from there downhill. What I'm simply saying is if you've got the director doing something of this nature, then this sets the standard for the whole pattern of what I have been saying all along of why the numbers are so egregious when it comes down to how African Americans are not promoted, never been at the top of the agency, never been in decision-making positions as far as all white being at the top. This is a pattern. This is a good old boy network that has been established for years in the service.
And what about the possibility that you won the case? We'll let I hope that's one of ours. Incoming. You've won the case. The fact that there's discrimination, it's not a question, it's a fact. But maybe this is one case. Maybe they did it to you. Maybe there was racism in your case. How can you say that the whole lot of them are a bunch of racists? How can you say that?
You know how I could say that? Very easily. That was one great thing that came out of this case. And you know what that was? The jury checked off on the verdict form. The United States Marshal Service is a racially hostile environment for all African Americans prior to 1991 and after 1991. The evidence they heard in that trial, as a matter of fact, from the managers that came in and testified, proved that the Marshal Service, this is a systemic and pervasive problem that has been taking place over years. Matthew Fogg just happened to be one in hundreds that this has occurred with. And that's what the jury found. And let me tell you something, that Judge Jackson would not have allowed that interrogatory to be placed on that verdict form if he had not heard evidence that indicated to him that it was a racially animus and hostile environment for African Americans. Matter of fact, that's one of the things that he said, he mentioned in the trial, was they got problems. They have certainly got problems when it comes down to their treatment of African Americans in this agency.
When things like this happen and someone falls on the sword or the sword falls on that person, you'd like to think that you've made things better, that you've changed things by the fact that your career as a U.S. Marshal, you've just said, is gone. You can't go back there and you won't go back. Is that correct?
I don't never want to say I won't. I just want to say at this point in time it appears that I'm moving on. Now maybe I could in some way be a part of the Justice Department and the Marshal Service in the capacity of helping to root out this problem at some point in time. I don't know, but at this point in time I'm still a U.S. Marshal, so I can't say what's going to happen when this is all said and done, the legalities of this. But I can tell you this, what this case has done, it has proven that racism runs from the top and works its way down. You see, this would never, if this wasn't sanctioned from the top, it would have never happened with Matthew Fogg. Ron Hine would have been nipped in the bud a long time ago. And many others in this agency. You have individuals in this agency that I could name, like Gary Meade, who the agency I just got information, Gary Meade is being promoted now to the third man in line in charge in Marshal, as associate director. This man has been behind the very policies that have created the scenario that we're talking about, the discrimination and disparity in the treatment, the reason why there are very limited number of African Americans in policy-making positions in the Marshal Service. Ken Haleko, these are names that have been around for 20 years. These are the people that were over the EEO section and the EEO division that have not, that should be held accountable because cases weren't investigated, because cases were delayed until people were beaten up in other fashions and other manners. This is what I'm talking about. I mean, we have people that have filed cases on this job, black managers that have alleged criminal violations such as, like what happened to me, another incident where the white individuals left me on a stakeout. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about where lives are being placed in danger. We had a black marshal in New York. A white marshal came forward, Stephen Zanowitz, you hear his name, came forward and explained how these white deputies pulled guns out and pointed them at the black marshal when he walked by and said, pow, 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 this is a dead nigga. This is what I'm talking about. We're saying there are a lot of events that are taking place. The Good Old Boy Roundup, we had 5 United States Marshals at the Good Old Boy Roundup. These names were all, this stuff came out in the trial. This is what we're talking about. We're saying this is a systemic and a pervasive problem that's taken place over years. It just so happened Matthew Fogg is just one of the ones that decided to stand up and decided to say, I don't care what this is going to cost me. At all costs, I'm going to fight this because I see it as really a pattern. And you're talking about an employee here that had an outstanding career, all kinds of accolades. My record spoke for itself. There was nobody that could come up there and say, no manager could come forward and say, this man was not doing an excellent job. The jury heard some pretty egregious things, and that's the reason why they came up with $4 million, the largest Title VII verdict for an individual on the record.
You fell on the sword for all the right reasons. What kind of agency did you leave behind, and what kind of agency is it now that you're gone? Is it different? Have things changed?
I'm being told they haven't. As I said, Mr. Gary Meade being made the third man tells me, no, it has not changed. As a matter of fact, it says this guy has a history. He's been there for a while. I would say in order for that agency to change, you first have to change the management of that agency. Bring in new people. Get rid of these people that have been around for years, have been able to seed in, been able to make friends. Cronyism, nepotism, this type of thing is a pattern now. People know who have filed complaints and so forth. Another example, just to give you an example of what I was saying about this individual, Mr. Meade. I mean, there's so many different things, and I don't know this 100% to be factual, and you can find this out, but I'm being told 100% that this man himself had serious disciplinary problems in the agency early on when it came down to his infidelity. saying, I mean, you know, a serious situation. The man was caught in the office in this situation, and nothing was ever done about it. This is a pretty strong allegation that's been out in this agency.
I'm going to stop you there and let, he's working his way down, but now we're into this point where it's one thing to go in and block some goofball's promotion.
Right.
It's another thing to take your newfound reputation as a troublemaker into the street where you have to depend on other people and they feel that they have to depend upon you. What did your whistleblowing, your trip to the Hill earn you when you got back to the street with the other guys?
Well, basically what happened was, once again, I became a marked individual. I mean, people saw that the officials in the agency were not backing me. As a matter of